Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Adeptus Ridiculous Podcast. My name is DK Diamantes, his name is Bricky, and we have a very special guest, Luetin, with us. But before we get into all that, if you would like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Adeptus Ridiculous, where you can get access to the Discord, bloopers if they happen. $15 tier gets you access to all of our posters in digital HD form. Also, you can follow the Patreon for free on Google, Apple, Facebook, and you can start a free trial. But the free trial will require a credit card. So, patreon.com/Adeptus Ridiculous. Bricky, tell them about the store.
Yeah, we have a brand new merch drop coming very soon. So keep your ears and eyes out for that. It's going to happen early October. We're talking dice. We're talking mats. We're talking clothing. It's all good stuff. Check out orchidate.com in the description for the Adderix section. And you can see a lot more of that. So, but keep an ear out. Some cool stuff. Also, we're going through the Horus Heresy trilogy, so read that as well. We're doing False Gods next, which I hear is also very good, because Garvio Loken is like the best character ever.
Yeah, he really is.
This is really cool. Luetin, how you doing, man?
Hello, good evening. How are you doing? Good evening, good morning, whatever time it is for when you're listening to this.
Good evening, good morning, and good night. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a little Truman here. I may have butchered the Truman thing, but it is how it is. You've been getting some Blue Boy representation lately.
Yes, it's very nice, of course. Nice to have, the best chapter being properly represented, so that's all good.
Okay.
Yeah, they haven't had a lot of representation before, so
Oh yeah,
I'm glad we're
so rarely covered are the Ultramarines.
Well, I feel like it's
really.
I feel like it's proportional, like it's proportional to the, merit, basically. So that's how.
Well, they do everything. Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when it comes, if I were to go on like a Warhammer Wikipedia and look up list of victories per chapter, they would be at top.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I guess they would, wouldn't they?
I mean, could it be because they have more stories? Maybe. But that's not how we're going to roll with that. It's all good.
I think today we were going to talk around a few different things related to Space Marine 2. Obviously, the Ultramarines were one of them. But I couldn't remember, do you have like a strong feeling about the Ultramarines from things you have read, or literally the sort of pop culture memery related to them?
Honestly, for me, I feel like it's a lot related to the pop culture memery, right? Where it's just a lot of like, oh, the Codex Astartes does not support this action type thing, and oh, they're such Boy Scouts, and oh, they always win. Oh, look at Marnius Calgar ripping the head off of a Lord of Skulls, and so it's a lot of that. But like it's weird too, because as soon as I start like reading about like Gilliman or like Uriel Vengers, it's like, oh, well, they're not really Boy Scouts at all. Like, sure, they win a lot, but it's not like they come out unscathed. It's not like they're perfect. It's like, oh, they kind of do have interesting characters. So I'm trying to kind of shake off the memery-based Ultramarine bias I have and actually, like, give them a fair shake. So,
I feel like that works for you, Bricky, DK, but I feel like for Bricky, the transition, the comparison, the scale between Night Lords and Ultramarines, is that just too big of a bridge to cross?
So, I mean, obviously, as of lately, there's a lot more Ultramarine stuff, obviously, due to the game. And despite me complaining about a lot of things about the game, I actually do still really, really like it as a video game, because video games are supposed to be fun, and it's pretty fun. Though the obvious thing that goes along with it is like Titus, for example. I actually like as a character. He's got a pretty decent arc in the second game that I think is like pretty well fleshed, even if I don't think the other two were as good. It's so crazy to say this, but I actually like Leandros. Like, I think his new position totally fits, and it really works. But no, I'm with Shai. Shai said, in my opinion, in general, Ultramarines are very mid as they're designed to be, but have some great characters. And no, I don't mean Primarch or Calgar. I don't know enough about Calgar in his own character. I mean, he barely had any screen time in the game. But I do love Gilliman as a character.
Gilliman now, sure, yeah.
Gilliman's fantastic. I also don't know enough about Calgar to parse the difference between Calgar versus Calgar in like text to speech, where he's like constantly depressed. But a lot of Ultramarines seem to have like depression. Like Uriel Ventress has gone through some shit. Keto Sicarius was the meme, but then they kind of like turned him into a genuinely like tragic character, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the reason why you don't know much about Calgar, and this is why I don't have a particular interest in him. And I said this in my video recently. He's not really a big fan. I'm not really a big fan of him. I mean, Gilliman's actually had more material really written about him, because Calgar basically doesn't really appear in any novels in a big way anyway. If you look at the sort of reference list for Calgar, it's White Dwarfs, Codexes. He is in Imperial Armor Volume 2. And then it's modern stuff like Dark Imperium and the Vigilus campaign, and obviously the comic stuff as well. That's basically it. There isn't like some huge Calgar. There isn't like a Calgar trilogy or anything like that. And of course, it does speak about like his personal history and stuff like that. But I mean, you know, if you go on any of the wikis and look at Calgar, it's brief. It's pretty brief. Like there isn't too much to go on with him, and that's why I feel like he's not a particularly interesting or great character. Gilliman's way more fleshed out. So yeah,
that's weird, because I would have figured. Oh, go ahead. Good.
No, I was saying just compared to other chapter masters, right? Like, I mean, not every chapter master has a huge amount of lore about them, but like you compare Calgar to like Dante, right? And it's a massive difference because you have Devastation of the Ball and all that kind of stuff. But it definitely does. But then again, there's a couple others like, I don't know, like what does Iron Father Phyros got going on? You know, he's just kind of like a dude. He's a metal dude, but yeah, I don't know. It also depends too, because like, you know, Uriel Ventress has a whole trilogy about the damn guy.
Yeah,
right. So
it
is a little surprising. Calgar is so light.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, it's because like I've seen so many Calgar memes.
Yeah, that's what I don't really understand as well. And I mean, I said this as well, like Tigurius has actually more sort of, I don't know, interesting lore snippets about him. And I think Tigurius would have been a more interesting figure as well. I mean, overall, there are just more interesting characters elsewhere, I think, that have appeared related to the Ultramarines. And yeah, Ventress obviously is a big one.
Yeah,
ask real quick, should I know who Tigurius is?
I've mentioned him once or twice. He's the lead librarian of the Ultramarines.
Gotcha. Okay, that would make sense as to why he would be kind of concerned with what would be happening in Space Marine 2, sure.
You make a really good point that Shy, that like Chief Librarian Tigurius, it would still be kind of like a random, like, you know, we didn't talk about him much prior, but it would have been a better choice because he has had a lot of like Tyranid related lore revolving him. Like I think he's the only person. Oh, is he the only person that appeared in the Tyranid hive mind, or did Mephiston do that too?
Oh,
regardless,
yeah, that's kind of a big deal, right? Like that's no small little dipsy doo dah day thing. That's huge.
I mean, Tigurius, he similarly to the Eldar, he can also kind of see forward in time a little, in the same way that sort of Farseers and stuff, because he is so incredibly powerful. And the accuracy related to his predictions as well, and the intentions of it. Obviously, he's had a lot of stuff to do with the Tyranids because of how much the Ultramarines have had to do with the Tyranids as well. But yeah, I think it's more suggested. It says many believe that he has been even able to penetrate the hive mind.
But yeah, Tigurius is like, he's kind of the big T. You know, he's kind of got some
big T. All right.
Yeah, he's had a lot of lore. I think he's one of the most, if not the most powerful Space Marine psyker. He's up there.
I think it's definitely said that he's like, you know, second only to the Emperor, perhaps. He's really quite powerful. Yeah,
he's nuts. It's actually kind of insane. Him and like Mephiston, I know, are both like really powerful psychers.
But I would say sit in the chair.
I would say Malkador, but he sat in the chair and it didn't go so well for him.
Also, it's also often these little short stories like the board is set, some of the heresy short stories. And I think Tigurius appears in this other one, Shadow of Leviathan, where he encounters a Malceptor. And that's another thing where he sort of encounters the hive mind. So it's been a few times. I think the point is that only an extremely powerful psyker would even be able to penetrate the hive mind, because of how, obviously, think about how immense the hive mind is. We talk about the shadow in the warp, but imagine being a psyker being able to actually penetrate and not have your brain just like ripped to shreds instantly, evaporated by, disintegrated by the power of the hive mind. Only somebody like, a high-end psyker is going to be able to do that. Which is why, do you know what I really love? Do you remember the 10th edition trailer? Where the Space Marine Terminator librarian just comes up and he just gets deleted by the Tyranids. And I was like, damn, that's pretty... Because, they do always make the Space Marines look to be so epic and overpowered and stuff. And I love the fact... And also, I love that animation where the Tyranid psyker is just like... It's sort of flexing its psychic muscles, and you see like this kind of swelling wave hits the Terminator psyker, the Terminator librarian, and he's just vaporized. He's just instantly gone. And I'm just like, that is epic, because a lot of the Tyranid psychic creatures are way off the scale. Or in the lore, forget about the tabletop, but yeah, they are absolutely off the scale compared to like human psychers.
Can I ask, since I'm sure a lot of people are finding this video via like Space Marine 2, like how bad is a zoanthrope? Like, because they're obviously like these big brainy sort of like, I don't know, are they psyker type things?
Yeah.
What are they on like a scale of like, oh god, these Tyranids are horribly awful psychers, right? Because I don't know about you guys, I sure do hate fighting those motherfuckers.
The Neurothrope is much worse too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty nasty.
Yeah, they usually come in like a group, don't they? In terms of
they come in twos in the game anyway. Yeah.
I think on the tabletop you can go. I think it's like up to 5.
Yeah. But they are kind of. I mean, it's funny. Like, you should never really compare the tabletop to the lore because it's just so incomparable. Like, it's miles apart. I think one of the things I never see talked about enough is the sort of reverse, the nulls, and what the effect can be there. Nulls are always described, like, as in human nulls, always described as being like grating to other humans. They kind of feel like an irritating presence. It's sort of scratching at your brain, and it kind of, their presence is discomforting because obviously humans, even all humans, have like this very low level psychic latency, but a null will push back against that and make you feel. So they often end up being, that's why they're called pariahs, because they end up being sort of pariahed by a community or whatever, because nobody wants to be around them.
That's actually one thing that they utilize a lot in the game, and they don't really explain it, but that's kind of one of the ones you don't really need to explain. Like Blackstone is the major driving force at the end of the game. It's the polarization between null and enhancement of the Blackstone thing. So the guy goes from null and he flips it over to enhancement, and that's what causes everything. Part of me was kind of like, I forget, what was the name of the guy? It was Luz, right? The AdMech guy?
Luz.
Yep.
I was like, Luz, just grab it and turn it over again. Just turn it over again.
Yeah.
When what's his bucket? And I was like, no, just spin it. But
he's a loser.
Did you think that was an actual null matrix? Do you like the Necron? Do you think they just found a Necron null matrix and was like, and then they just kind of powered it up, basically?
It definitely seemed that way because he clearly turned it on, and then because we know Blackstone, when affected by the particular like polarization, either you can enhance or nullify psychic in the warp. And so clearly, the final mission obviously was spinning the things over to reverse the polarization.
I was going to say, for anybody who doesn't know, like a null matrix, they're like a little self-defense thing on Necron tomb worlds. So the idea was, when the Necrons went into their immense sleep for millions of years, obviously they were worried about being attacked. They weren't too worried about being physically attacked. They were worried about being psychically attacked. So they've got these null matrices, and basically, if activated, it creates a localized null matrix around a planet. So if you have a tomb world, it basically creates this null sphere around the planet, and just, as you see in the game, completely blocks anything from the warp or psychic activity, which would be chaos or Eldar. And Shai's right. It also disrupts Tyranid synaptic links, which brings me to like two things I want to talk about. One, they could have locked that in with the end of Space Marine 2, which is something I didn't talk about in my original video and thought about it later, and I was like, oh, I could have mentioned that. Basically, they could have locked that in with the story of, because as you guys discussed and I discussed, it doesn't particularly clearly resolve what happens with the Tyranids in the game. And they could have linked those two things together, and I think that would have been really amazing to sort of make that connection narratively, and just it would have made sense to finish the whole campaign of the game, and so on and so on. You killed two birds with one stone. But the other thing is this is one of my quite big theories for 40k. Obviously, at the moment in the contemporary lore, they're trying to sort of seal the rift, and the Mechanicus are trying to do stuff with the Blackstone to try and do that, and the Necrons are sort of doing their own thing as well. Even if they resolve the rift, and if they resolve stuff with chaos, and they seal that up, well, they've still got to deal with the Tyranids, and that's like a problem that's like 1,000 times worse. And it's like, what do you do about that? Well, if the Imperium is able to use Blackstone to create like a sort of null barrier, essentially, kind of what Cryptman was trying to do when he did the Exterminatus thing, where he was like, if I Exterminatus enough planets, the Tyranids won't be able to get enough biomass to make it worth it. I'll keep going, which doesn't really, which doesn't really make any sense when you consider the fact they had to get to our galaxy in the first place. And it's like, if you're traveling from one galaxy to another, that's a long way to travel without having any sustenance. So clearly, they can travel for massive distances.
Yeah, Cryptman wasn't exactly the smartest of all people, though. Like, he wasn't exactly the best.
It's some interesting ideas.
Very interesting choice.
His,
he's not gone forever.
No, his ideas were sound. His execution needed some work.
Yeah,
he basically did the Halo thing, starve the Tyranids of their food source.
I like how he's excommunicated from the Inquisition, but then sort of was like, no. And that's kind of the funny thing with the Inquisition that I like, is that an Inquisitor can be excommunicated by other Inquisitors, but then the galaxy is so big, they could just go somewhere else and nobody would know, and they can just carry on doing whatever the hell they want. So they're basically, once you're an Inquisitor, you're basically, immune for all time unless they catch up with you.
Someone said something hilarious, which was, I forgot where the post was, but it was like, the average Inquisitor commits 10 Exterminatuses a year. And it's like, that's bad data, because Inquisitor Cryptman commits 400,000 Exterminatuses every half second, so that the data is being mixed up to 10 Exterminatuses per year, and he should have been removed from the data pool.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't Ultramarines, what chapter would you have wanted Space Marine 2 to be?
Ooh.
You know what? I gotta be honest. I think that the general visual like spectacle and stuff of Space Marine 2 is pretty good, like the Hive worlds and the Hive cities and like all that like splendor. But part of me would have liked a lot more. Shai says Death Watch, which I would agree with, but
I think that's the fair choice, actually. Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people say that. It does present lots of really good opportunities.
I would have liked a bit more like gimmick stuff, vehicle sections and things. I would have killed for White Scars. I think if you could have done a couple bike missions or like a speeder thing and done a couple modes where it's like shows the grandeur and size of where you're going through by being on a bike or a speeder. I don't know. I think that would have been super cool. And also, White Scars don't get any love. I mean, Death Watch just got relegated to Age of the Inquisition, so they're getting like less than love. They're getting punished, but even so.
Does it make me vanilla ice cream that I'm just like, I wouldn't mind seeing the Blood Angels in something like this?
People love the Blood Angels.
They haven't.
Because like, if you could shoehorn in like a Black Rage mechanic too, that'd be really cool, and I'd really like that. And that
would have made for a good tragic character fall, having one of your squad mates fall with the Black Rage.
Yeah.
He starts occasionally calling the enemies you're fighting Horus, and you're like, what?
Oh no, this is bad.
Death Watch, I mean, that opening cutscene with the Death Watch in the Corvus Black Star is like the coolest Warhammer cutscene I've seen. It's
that
so
is
good.
that is a great introduction to Warhammer, right? If you want to like sell someone on like the scope and grandeur of Warhammer, just play the intro. Like even if you can't for some reason stomach it, just play the intro because that'll sell you.
It is unfortunate that the coolest part involved the Death Watch, and it is literally after they got relegated to Agents of the Inquisition, and they're not even a real faction anymore. It's such a humorous thing, even though it really sucks.
Also, give us the beaky helmets already for customization. What's going on?
I think that's actually
What's
a good
going
point. I think Death Watch would make a pretty great. Oh, Shy beat me to it. Yep. Because you can have each character from the Death Watch from a different, legion.
Yeah. You could have so many different Legion characters, and they mix in. And oh, you're right.
That could have absolutely been a great way to have like a dynamic between a Dark Angel and a Space Wolf, and the Space Wolf be generally kind of heroic, and the Dark Angel be, the Dark Angels.
Dark Angel, yep.
Yeah. And see
yeah,
what
that would
happens
make
there.
some really good character dynamic moments for sure.
Luetin, would you also pick Death Watch, or did you have a different idea?
I probably would, but where I sort of started to go when I was thinking about it the other day was, everybody was sort of saying different chapters, and it's like, Templars would be really cool. Blood Angels would be good, like DK was saying, because of the Black Rage and all that kind of thing. That would be really interesting to do. I would even like to maybe, they wouldn't do it because it's not full on enough, but it would be really cool to go into some of the other chapters like Nova Marines or Minotaurs or other guys like this.
Minotaurs, yes. Let's go.
That would be really cool. It would never happen, but like that would be fun. Consoles, perhaps, something like that. Obviously, I think like imagine a Dark Angels one. What you could do with no, I'm not even talking about redoing specifically Space Marine 2 because I think it does need to tie the Titus a bit. But if you're going to do like another Space Marine game, imagine if you did a Dark Angels one. Imagine where you could go with that, like in terms of traitors and inquisitors out for you and all sorts of stuff like that. And not only that, obviously the Primarchs come back, so you could have the Lion potentially,
Yep.
Even if he doesn't appear, you could have some communication, like, something going on there. You could have that as well. But where that line of thinking of, okay, if you're going to do some other kind of game like this kind of third-person action, the same kind of cool, a great vehicle for narrative, etc., we could really do with a Sisters of Battle game. Imagine.
I don't think you really need to sell Bricky on that, right, dude? Like,
well, we had one. It was a VR game, and I have not played it, so I'm hoping it's good.
That's right. There is a VR game about it, isn't there?
Yeah, but I don't have a VR set anymore. So
imagine what you could do. You could have a character.
Oh, yeah.
She starts out as a Repentia.
You rises
through it. Ooh,
I already had a game idea based around this. I had an Army of Two game concept where it's a sister and a Repentia sister. And the two are stuck on the planet or whatever, and the main sister doesn't like the Repentia sister because obviously. And no, they're not gay, Shy. I mean, they can be gay. If they want to be gay, they can be gay. I don't know, but that's not part of the game. I don't know. Who cares?
But it could be.
Faith is more important than sex. But as you go through it, like you have the gun sister play more like a third person shooter, and then the Repentia does a bit more like Devil May Cry melee combat. And then they slowly start to like trust each other over the course of the campaign. Very like Army of Two murder.
Is it, just talking about sister stuff, a thought came into my head because it's really funny. Is it the Triumph of St. Catherine? Often this is the case Bricky will attest to this. When you've read or listened to a lot of 40k, at a certain point, novels start to blur together.
Yeah,
but anyway, the scene in this novel is so funny because it's like they're these sisters on a world, and it's all kind of like going bad as usual, or so on and so on. But I think some of the local militia or like guard or whatever, they kind of like, they either wolf whistle or they make some comment to the sororitas as they're passing by.
Call the sister.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, that seems an extraordinarily bad idea. Like,
yeah, like there could be if you want to die, there are easier ways to do it.
that's funny you mentioned that, because like that sometimes the books can blur. I don't know where this come from. Someone got spread some misinformation. They thought that I played through the campaign of Space Marine 2 while listening to the Horus Heresy book. Not
I saw somebody say that.
Oh,
did you? I don't know where that came from. I listened to it afterwards, because the idea of like listening to the Horus Rising while playing a video game for the first time is insanity.
Wild.
And again, this was one I was going to mention related to Sororitas. I think it's in the Dawn of Fire series. I think it's Gate of Bones. There's a cool part with a cultist who kind of like progresses, I would say. That would be the thing. It's an interesting setup, because we always see chaos cultists as being these kind of disposable cannon fodder that just are shredded. Like you see that throughout like Space Marine 2, but also just in everything elsewhere, right? They're just kind of like background detritus, really, aren't they?
Unless it's that chaos sniper cultist, that little piece of shit, that little son of a.
I really enjoy how in Space Marine 2, when you shoot the cultists, they just like fucking explode. They
or even if you just
if I was going to say
punch them and they just like disintegrate into blood.
I was playing PvE the other night. I'm pretty sure I literally ran through one.
You're just like A-Train.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I imagine it's because Luetin, I mean, you've read Dan Abnett books and Aaron Dembski Bowden books, and they love doing that thing where they talk about a side character for like a whole chapter and they get really invested and they just like straight kill them. Particularly like there's a rogue trader character in the first Night Lord novel, and I remember being like, this is really interesting, and he's just like the Stardy Strike Cruiser just incinerates him into dust.
Yeah.
Within like the next chapter. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's done.
So I feel like it was in one of the Dawn of Fire books again, maybe one of the early ones. But anyway, I really love it. It's just a cute moment, which sounds funny, but I'll explain. It's just this little Mechanicus dude, like this little Mechanicus serf, or like low level tech priest, like low level. And he's just, I can't remember why it's relevant, but he's in like the bowels of a ship, and he's just in some conduit, and he's just doing little work, and he's like singing himself a little song. He's like, praise be to the Omnissiah, 01110. He's having a lovely day, and he's trying to fix this little thing in this conduit that's related to the engines or whatever. He's like, oh, it's not quite aligned right. I better fix that. And he's just having a super fun time on his own, just down there, just doing what he needs to do. And he's just obviously having a lovely day. And then I think it cuts back to like the captain or whatever, and they're like, oh, we've got to go, blah, blah, they've got to go somewhere, whatever. Powers up the engines. Like, they've established this little dude like down in this conduit of the ship, and then he realized like it cuts back or something, and it's like he realizes like, oh wait, the ship's powering up. Immediately, like being Mechanicus is like, oh well, there's no way I'm getting out of here in time. Oh well, I'll try to finish this anyway, at least before I get incinerated. And then he just gets vaporized.
Oh, poor little guy.
That's really funny though.
Oh man, that's so sad and tragic and funny. What the hell? How many people do you think are gonna fall into like the tabletop via Space Marine 2? Like, because if you've never done Warhammer and this is your first foray, and you play through Space Marine 2, and it's like, whoa, this is just wow, and then you kind of look at the tabletop, there is a little bit of a disconnect, right?
Yeah,
because
I mean,
you're kind of expecting that whoa action, and it's like, well, there's this tabletop. Don't get me wrong, tabletop very cool, but like there's a bit of a disconnect, right?
I mean, it is kind of funny. Like, I always joke that people are going to get really excited to buy Reavers, and then they're going to buy Space Marine Reavers and be like, oh, this is worthless. But I don't know. I mean, like, I think it'll definitely get some people. Yeah, I think there'll definitely be people who do get into it, no doubt.
Sure,
but it's, I think, yeah, I mean, that's the hard part, right? It's like, oh, on one hand, I played this like grandiose epic games campaign with all this crazy blood and murder, and then it's like translating that to, okay, hitting on threes.
Rolling the dice, right? Yeah, exactly. It's a tough transition.
If nothing else as well, I mean, one thing that I always talk about in 40k is the scale and how it's done badly in the novels. They've tried to improve, I think, over time, and it's gotten a bit better. But I've had a big rant about that before where, they'll talk about these gigantic battles, in 40k, and they're like, the numbers are like 100,000 guardsmen died. 100,000. Jesus, like go look at the numbers of casualties in World War II, and it's like,
Yeah,
you're in this like the Imperium of Mankind, galactic scale battles, and it's like 100k. What the hell is that? It's nothing. Like
yeah, that's not even a drop in the bucket. Like,
well, there's that one where again you see the pure horror. Is it in Valdor, Birth of the Imperium, where the custodians just enter into the room? And they're just like, it'd be like a Terminator, like I'm talking about like a T-1000, just kind of coming into a room with people who've just got regular weapons, and it's just like not even attempting to avoid the fire coming at it. It just literally is like walking forward, like you're dead, 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 and the guardsmen are trying like their best to like take it down. They're trying their ultimate best. This guy's not even trying. It's just like just pasting all of them.
It's shy for all the kids. The Darth Vader scene in Rogue One.
Yeah,
pointing soy jack meme. Oh my god, it's Darth Vader.
oh come on, you can't tell me you didn't love that scene.
Hey, the scene is done. For me, that scene is a lot like the Calgar scene, where it's like it kind of does come out of nowhere, but it's kind of badass. So I do like.
Okay, cool. I was like, oh, we cannot besmirch that scene from Rogue One where he throws the guy on the ceiling, he's stuck there, boom, and still cuts him in half. Like that's fucked up, Vader.
It is a rule of cool scene where like but the inside of my mind is still doing a little bit of like the what is this. But the other part of me is like, okay, this is kind of cool though. Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you pleased to see so many new people coming into 40k?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's a great thing. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've been constantly saying that the entire point of our podcast here is to get people interested so they can go watch your videos, Luetin.
Yeah, we're the Foot in the Door podcast, right?
Yeah, and before you provide them with like complete factual evidence.
I've just seen so many like I think I said it on one of my videos recently. No. I was going to say I'd seen on one of my videos recently was just so many like big S tier streamers and YouTubers who are just like, so what's this 40k thing? And then they're just going on a rabbit hole, and it's just it's great, really expanding out. Like I've seen like off the top of my head was like Charlie Moist Critical, one of them. He just like binged the first game, binged this one, and was like, it's fucking epic. I love it. It's amazing. And it's like having figures like that, with that kind of reach. I think that's the thing. Yeah. It's like 40k struggles with reach sometimes, I think, and it's amazing to me how you see people stumble upon it and go, what the heck? Like, why isn't this bigger? And
tabletop wargaming just isn't a very popular thing in the grand scheme of the world, and like that's not a bad thing, but
no,
it's going to be hard to translate. What do you think, Luetin?
I think it's true. I think I'm scared to start discussing the current status of the tabletop game because I feel like you probably have a lot to say, and it could just go off in an innumerable number of directions with how the state of the miniatures are in terms of things that have been retired and come back, how often the rule updates come recently, what certain rule updates there are, like the 10th edition started off with, what was their tagline for it? Simple but not simple, something.
Simplified, not simple.
Yeah, bullshit.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of.
They were half right. They were half right. It was definitely simplified.
They did in the beginning. Everybody was like, "Cool, this all makes sense. It seems much clearer." And then the bloody competitive gamers got their foot in the door, and it was like, shot in the head. Like it's. Everybody who wanted, like, they need to. They can't continue trying to do what they do now. They can't continue trying to appeal to multiple different groups with the same rule set. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I saw some interesting polls, Bricky, on various tabletop gaming channels recently, where there's a few people who had done polls of their community of how often do you play 40k?
It's got to be like once a month or something, right?
Yes. For the majority of people, it's like once a month. It's not, unless you're a competitive person who's going out and playing 2 days every weekend, or even more so if you're like maybe doing a tabletop gaming channel. I don't know, like maybe they're playing multiple games per week, and so they just know the rules like inside out, and so rule updates really don't matter. But if you're, me, or, and you are literally like, because that's about what I do. I probably play about like once a month. You probably don't need the granular rule refreshers that they constantly do to be able to just play the game and have fun with it. The same with the lore. I mean, another thing I've said, right? Loads of people I see all the time, they're really hyped about Space Marine. They come to me. I've seen comments. I've had people on my Discord coming to me and saying like, hey, I just got into things. I've got this so far. I've got this so far, and I've heard about this. I've heard about my prime example is always Gathering Storm. They're like, oh, I've heard about this Gathering Storm. Where can I get the books? Yep. Well, bad luck. Unfortunate timing. You're about 4 years too late. You will not be able to get those anywhere other than eBay, and the 3 books will cost you about £150. That's like,
I guess that's a question. There's people getting into the hobby in general from Space Marine 2. What about people getting back into the hobby? Because
in what sense?
People that maybe dropped out of it for a little bit because maybe they weren't into the tabletop anymore, and like Space Marine 2 is like their sort of reawakening and like resurgence into the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, like I know a lot of people. I mean, this is kind of where we had a bit of a disconnect when it came to our thoughts on the game. Is that like I know a lot of people who weren't super big into the game got to see like crazy Space Marine bros doing Space Marine things, and that was like, that's all they wanted from it, and for them it's like the coolest game ever. And I'm curious if that was like, because I know a lot of people who started playing Warhammer back in say 5th edition or before that, the idea that they would get a game like Space Marine 2 with this level of production quality is like unheard of, right?
Yeah. That's basically what I said in my overview, you see. Like Bricky, I watched your discussion about the game, and I genuinely find the difference of opinion really interesting, because I think even you yourself was sort of had your thoughts that you gathered, but then were sort of like almost looking outside yourself at your opinion and going, wait a minute, and sort of, I don't know, that's the impression I got, because you were sort of discussing about why you were feeling a certain way, and if it's because you were kind of too close to the fire almost, as it were. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's sort of
a little bit, yeah. No, you're correct. It was definitely one of those things where I feel like, my prior expectations definitely had a bit of a thought process in there, more than it probably should have. And I'm making a follow-up video because I'm already over 100 hours into Space Marine 2.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I said was that, it didn't get like a perfect rating from me. It was pretty high. Like I gave it 8 out of 10, but the reason I sort of gave it such a good score from my mind was like the flaws that were there didn't detract for me from my expectation, so it was
sure.
The PvP I hated, and I don't want to play it, and I tried it and was like, but it's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant to what I wanted to get out of the game. I can just literally forget it exists forever, and it will not affect my opinion of the game in any way. Similarly, the resolution of the Tyranids things. And again, Bricky, this is another thing. Like, when you're so deep into lore, I find anyway, especially with 40k, I spend so much time speculating and thinking that when a question is unanswered in 40k, I can pretty reasonably rationalize it in my mind of like, oh, well, probably this is what happened, So
sure.
I'm not saying though that is necessarily acceptable for everybody, because I'm certain that many people either don't do that or that's just not how they approach things. They like things to be resolved and tidied up. But I'm definitely one of those people where if a movie, for example, is just open-ended, I kind of like it. I like it because it gives me thoughts at the end of like, well, what about this? Or what about this? And try to come to the most rationalized, sort of logically reasonable solution. But again, I do agree. The sorcerer in the game, who the hell is he? Why does he matter? Who cares?
A lot of lack of that kind of stuff. I like open-ended stuff a lot, but normally the open-ended thing kind of goes along with like with the narrative, other things are concluded in a way. I know what you mean though. Like what a critique is for me may not be a critique for you.
Yeah.
For me, it is a little bit of a kind of like a more of a meta thing where I look at it and I'm like, well, they advertise like not the Space Marine, the Tyranid like big hive mechanic where they all kind of jumble together and stuff like that, and it's kind of such a big deal, and it does kind of feel like they're just like left off halfway through, and then they never use that mechanic with like the Thousand Sons, and then you just kind of move on, But there's that little part of my brain that can't reconcile that, and that's my character flaw. Speaking of, I want to read one of Shai's thing because I think it's actually a pretty good like metric to judge by. I think our main mistake is that we made our review episode for ourselves, not so much Warhammer fans or our fans. We talked about what we expected and wanted, but not what the Warhammer fans at large expected and wanted. So while we all kind of like stand by our opinions, I think there is a good point to step back and like, let the new fans get impressed by the game and old 40k fans get back into it, because it is true. At the end of the day, this is a game that is like the closest we've ever got to anything genuine of like Warhammer in the larger mainstream, and they did do it pretty well.
Really well, yeah.
So we did get a bit up our own ass, and that was one of the things I think I left out a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing a follow-up thing, is because I want to talk about more of the positives, because I think I was a little overly negative, and I'd like to kind of talk about like example, the Guard are represented so incredibly well in this game.
Oh yeah,
love the Guard. I feel weird leaving DK out of this conversation, but DK really liked the game, and I didn't give him enough time to speak in our episode because it was me, Kirioth, and Shai being like, "Man, this was not it," and DK was like, "Damn, I really enjoyed myself." Sometimes you might need to take a little bit and remember, like, no, you still like this game, and if you like the game, it's probably better to put a lot more effort into understanding how to deliver proper, adequate praise versus criticism, depending on the bits. I still stand by. I think the story is still pretty damn mid, but like I did like a lot of it, and I feel like I didn't put enough time into talking about that stuff. Well, so it's important to show that off,
I think it's totally fair. I just think that for me, it was not necessarily something which heavily detracted from the overall game for me. Like, it didn't make me come out of it at the end and go, "Oh man, that sucked." Like, it was so disappointing. I came out of the game thinking like, "Damn, yeah, that was a baller game. Like, absolutely loved it." And that's despite me thinking Calgar's absolutely boring. Like, to be fair as well, Calgar standing at the end of the Thunderhawk just shooting down, that was a pretty epic. And
it was cool. It was a cool entrance.
However, I will raise you Tigurius stepping out from that Thunderhawk, jumping off onto the ground, and just vaporizing everything in visible distance with like a psychic storm. I think that would be, considerably more epic.
For me, I just wanted Calgar to be in the game in the beginning.
They could have just undermined the entire game by just having Calgar appear at the end and do another Lord of Skulls and just
rip Imra's head off.
Yes. He just jumps out the Thunderhawk onto the greater demon, and it's just like
the Lord of Change.
His neck off, and it's like bang, problem solved.
The giant Lord of Changes.
Luetin, I've changed my mind. I think I know a different way that we can make Calgar worse.
Actually, speaking of that, we never even got to.
I can fix it.
We never even got to kind of me outlining why the Ultramarines are good either. We didn't get to that. I could go over that very briefly for you.
Oh, this is going to be brief?
Yeah, it will be brief, to be fair, because it's the Ultramarines are actually relatively straightforward, I think,
Yeah. Tell me.
Yeah.
Or us.
I mean, well, before I even speak about it, just briefly, like, what is the thing, like we said at the beginning, you guys maybe just have only the sort of Ultramarines veneer perspective, perhaps, right? Like, it's just the box art guys, always the,
Yeah, they're the poster boys of 40k, right?
Yeah.
I can't even
we've
remember.
learned a little bit more lately, I think, but yeah.
So, I mean, but obviously you know about what happened in the Heresy with the Ultramarines. They didn't make it to Terra. They were delayed.
Calth, right?
Yeah. Because Calth and the Ruin Storm. Okay, you obviously know about
Go
that.
Erebus.
Yeah, and then Imperium Secundus and all this stuff. So, short version is the Ultramarines couldn't get to Terra in time. They were cut off. The word bearers attacked them. They got stuck there. Then the Imperium Secundus. They couldn't travel through the warp, and so Gilliman legitimately thought, what happens if Horus destroys Terra? And, again, this is where the lore versus the memery irritates me sometimes because, Shai casually betrayed the Emperor. It's funny, but it annoys me sometimes because it's like, it's actually, if you approach the lore like I do with like a modicum of seriousness, it's like Gilliman's thinking is totally reasonable. If the Emperor has been destroyed and Terra is crushed, he needs to try and make something of what he can. Try and perhaps pull together whatever loyalists are left, create some kind of secondary thing which is going to be able to continue the fight, however misguided. Nonetheless, when it became apparent that was not the case, Gilliman erased like urgently all records and was like, yeah, that never happened. That was not a thing.
Yeah.
But the thing was what changed I for the longest time was, even as somebody who is an Ultramarines player, because like I've told innumerable times now, I got into the Ultramarines not because I chose them as such. I was a kid when I first started doing 40k, and I just picked the Ultramarines because I liked the color, and they were one of the chapters that were not being played by my friends. So I was like, oh yeah, cool, Ultramarines, whatever, like I kind of like the colors of them and stuff like that. Their chapter colors and the bright yellow trim on their shoulder plates and stuff like that. But for the very longest time, even though you had the story in White Dwarf about Gilliman and all these kind of things, they didn't have some of the interest that like the Dark Angels had or the Blood Angels had and so on. They didn't have that kind of interest. What was the thing that defines them? And it isn't really until you get the perspective of the heresy that I think you get what defines them, which is this crushing feeling of like responsibility that they failed. Basically, they failed. They couldn't get to Terra on time, and like, to be fair, like many other loyalists, they still feel this crushing weight of humiliation that they were unable to save the Emperor. They couldn't intervene. They couldn't bring it. Imagine, I mean, and even Horus and the traitors were extremely worried about Gilliman arriving because of the sheer massive scale of the Ultramarines. Because again, this is the other thing people, I don't know if I wouldn't say, I always say people forget, but it's not people forget. I think sometimes it's just not referenced enough that people are even aware of it, that the legions were like pretty wildly different in their numbers. Because
they were huge.
They hadn't been cut down to 1,000 yet, and that's right. So you had massive legions, or not chapters, right? Legions.
No, again, I think. Do you mean Luetin? Like, is that like Ultramarines and stuff had like a huge, way more than like word bearers and stuff, right? Like,
hundreds
that way,
and hundreds of thousands more Astartes. Like,
yeah.
Ridiculous numbers, like absolutely massive. I'd have to go and just look at, again, I don't carry these in my head, like I'd have to go and look it up, but the Ultramarines were like way bigger, and it's because they had a really stable gene seed, unlike others who didn't and were just not particularly able to easily get new recruits in, and also, Gilliman is not Angron, so like,
he keeps them alive.
Yeah, he keeps the guys alive, and also, I mean, there's literal examples of the World Eaters just throwing themselves at enemy and getting slaughtered, but they're just like, send more in, like, they're just going to overwhelm them with weight of numbers. But yeah, Gilliman is pragmatic, logical. He thinks about things. He has amazing ability to structure and order his legion and the Ultramar and everything like that. So basically they were extremely successful in creating new Astartes and keeping them alive and all this kind of stuff. So they end up with a legion which is absolutely massive. So if the Ultramarines had got to Terra, it would have been all over, like, easily. And that's why the traitors very, very much wanted that not to happen, which is what they managed to do. Anyway, so imagine knowing that. Imagine being the Ultramarines, knowing that. Imagine knowing you had everything you needed to stop it from happening, and you failed. The only thing, the only time when it really mattered, and you catastrophically failed because you couldn't get there. And I'm pretty sure basically that's what defines the Ultramarines. It haunts them. And that's why one of my favorite banners of the Ultramarines, which appears in one of the codexes, it's from I think it's like a third company banner or something, but it's to do with the behemoth assault of the Tyranids and so on and so on on Macragge. The actual Tyranid part is irrelevant. The Space Marine is holding a little banner, and on the banner it says, "Our presence remakes the past." And that kind of tells you everything you need to know about the Ultramarines. Their behavior as the kind of straight as an arrow sort of Space Marines is because in their mind they are attempting to be the kind of linchpin for all the other Astartes. They want to be the model by which others base themselves upon, because they want to be reliable and stalwart, and they want to basically do what they didn't do in the Heresy, which is, prevent chaos from overwhelming everything. And they do that by maintaining order and discipline and structure and, making everything as stable as possible. And that's basically what it is. And I think along with that, they carry this huge guilt around with them that they failed horribly. And it's, that's their way of interpreting and sort of displaying that. So I think the Ultramarines are kind of cool if you think about it from that point of view. They get a lot of crap thrown at them, but I think actually there's a kind of sadness in it, in along with other things, which is, they're sort of looked at as being boring and blah, blah, blah. But actually, I think they're pragmatic, which is how Guilliman is. And in some respects, like we were saying earlier, right, Bricky, Guilliman.
Hi, it's me.
Guilliman, he's a really interesting character. He's cool. Like the fact that he's willing to listen to just ordinary humans, unlike so many Astartes who are just like, get this peasant out of my face.
Beneath me.
Like,
yeah.
And his way of dealing with things is so much more relatable and cool and interesting. And it's like, that's kind of how the Ultramarines are, and if they weren't, they will be now that he's back, and so on and so on. And I think the other last thing that I would say is also, I always think about like Aeonid Thiel. Do you remember Aeonid Thiel?
I'm not familiar with that name. No.
Nope.
Thiel was like an Ultramarine. He's the guy who got censured at Calth. Basically, he was an Ultramarine. He was aboard one of the ships when the World Bearers attacked and everything like that. And he had been censured for basically, Ultramarines always have this thing of like theoretical, and they're encouraged to speculate about things they need to do or what they need to do. Basically, Guilliman, like planning everything, right? Make plans, calculate what you need to do ahead of time. And so for Thiel, like he had actually raised the possibility of heresy before it even came upon. So he had been saying, hey, look, what if other Space Marines attack us at some point? And he basically got censured for that, which is basically like he got sort of, penalty or whatever, because he obviously, even suggesting that was like,
how dare you even
outrageous.
Suggest such a thing?
Yeah, exactly. And so he got censured, and censure was where they would paint their helmet red as like a disgrace, basically. But then when the Wordbearers attacked at Calth, demons were everywhere as well at the time on the ships. And he had been waiting to speak to Guilliman, I think, because he'd been censured for suggesting this possibility. Because basically what he had said was, look, if other legions attack us at some point, we need to be ready to deal with that. And therefore we need to think about how we're going to do that, because they know us. They know how we are going to respond. So we need to think about doing something different. And he was instrumental in Calth, because he basically was like, look, if we go in there and behave like Ultramarines, the Wordbearers are going to destroy us, because they know exactly what we're going to do. So he was like, we need to be different. We need to be more brutal. We need to behave more unrelenting. We need to just, not retreat, charge headlong into them, even if we're taking massive losses, because they won't expect it and it will overwhelm them. And that's kind of his sort of thinking, was how they managed to sort of survive that scenario. So it's just another interesting character,
So you guys are idiots. They're going to be looking for army guys.
Yeah. But the other
I
thing
think
was
that's kind of interesting that like
Yeah.
the Ultramarines, like, because I've always looked at them as like the perfect little schoolboys that like even with all of their wins and their perfections, all they think about is that one time that they failed.
I feel like that's
That's-
genuinely true. I feel like it must be a constant thing which haunts them.
Yeah.
Because think
Yeah.
about it, like as a Space Marine, you're taught to obviously understand all this history of your chapter and the Legion and the all the events of the Astartes through the Heresy probably as well. And so they will 100% know that that is the case and carry that around with them all the time. And
Yep.
think about
That's
it.
their cross to bear, right?
Yeah. Well, not unlike
to
obviously
word bear.
others. Well, yeah, again, but I mean, obviously not
Mine's too.
not unlike other Astartes, obviously also that were around the Siege of Terror as well. So, I mean, to be fair, I don't think it's only the Ultramarines. All the Loyalists obviously carry that same guilt that they were unable to stop it from happening. But I think what's different for me, what's different is that whereas like the Imperial Fists or the White Scars or the Blood Angels, they all had sort of like localized reasons why they couldn't defend the Emperor. There was so much happening there, and they'd suffered like massive losses and all that kind of thing. The Ultramarines really hadn't. The Ultramarines, that's why I say, if the Ultramarines had been able to get to Terra, everything would have been theoretically fine. They would have just annihilated all the traitors. And that's what they did in the Scouring, which is largely led by the Ultramarines, like afterwards. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting, and I think that's why they carry it with them perhaps more than others, because others were kind of like, well, we did our best, damn it, but
at least we were at Terra, and we were on the front lines of Terra. We were fighting chaos, whereas the Ultramarines are like, we didn't even see him, we didn't even take part in it. We were stuck, and So I imagine it does probably stick in the Ultramarines' craw.
But I love that saying.
Harder.
Yeah, and I love that saying, and I've inscribed it on some of my miniatures, like on the tanks and stuff, like our presence remakes the past, because that's epic to me. That's really awesome. It's this idea of by simply existing in the contemporary Imperium, they're making up for the fact of where they failed, and that's why they are how they are, because they don't want to end up like the Templars. They don't want to be like that. They want to be consistent and stable so they can make up for the shortcomings in the past. Anyway, that's basically Ultramarines for me. And so it's not particularly complicated, I don't think, but I think I don't know, have I sold you? Does it make you think about it any differently? I don't know.
I think a little bit, actually. I'm trying to shake off the Ultramarine bias from all the memery, and having like that one catastrophic failure be like just this like massive
defining
cross that they just have to it's just at their very core is like, we have to be better because, oh my God, we made the biggest oopsie poopsie ever, is just like, I get it now. Like I kind of get it.
For me, it's that's always good, but I also like, I have a lot of respect for the baseline, because there has to be one, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There are like
stick.
There's always the main base, and I think as far as Ultramarines go, they might not be the most interesting to me. I mean, the reason I like the Night Lords so much is because they're maybe the farthest from a Space Marine you can get. They're just like horrible gangsters, and that's one of the reasons I appreciate it. But there has to be the baseline. Same thing with like the Cadians. There always has to be like the one that goes, what is the most Space Marine that there can be? And I can very easily be like Ultramarines. If you want the pure understanding of what an Astartes is supposed to be like, you can point to the Ultramarines.
Mm-hmm. And Shai makes a good point as well, that some of the writers have added damage to Ultramarine reputation over time. At one point, GW wrote Codex Ultramarines, but changed it to Codex Space Marines at the last minute. So it's insanely Ultramarine focused. And they also added literal lines of text about how all Space Marines envy Ultramarines, look up to them, and so on and so on. So that's obviously going to make everybody annoyed if it's sort of minimizing and diminishing their own sort of chapter as well.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time, coming out and doing this with us. Was extremely cool of you, man.
Super appreciate it.
Yeah, if you ever need me to carry you in Space Marine 2 PvP, let me know. I'm always around. I'm sure it'll be great. And
maybe the PvE, right?
Maybe the PvE.
I think next time, if I come back again, we need to be discussing about the Word Bearers or the Night Lords. I think it has
I would love to talk about the Word Bearers. I think they're super underrated. And I used to call them the dad chaos faction because only people who have read enough Horus Heresy books and can understand the Word Bearers enough like them.
So I look, I'm not trying to besmirch Word Bearers, but you were given an opportunity to be, he's like, oh, Night Lords or Word Bearers, and you didn't immediately Night Lords out.
All right. So DK, after my reviews of Space Marine 2, I'm teaching myself restraint and an understanding of what the people want. And you know what? It's time. It's time. Okay. I've said enough about my faction. Let's talk about something different. I'm locked in a room with Horus, Abaddon, and Erebus, and I have a gun with 2 bullets. I commit exterminatus on Erebus twice.
Twice, yeah.
Anyway, Luetin, shout yourself out, man. I'm sure people know you already, but do the Luetin pleasantries, for the hell of it. Why not?
Shai's saying they haven't read End and the Death. They don't know what Erebus did.
Did he do more?
Well, what else can he do?
Well, how can he possibly get worse?
How can he get worse?
You'll have to read it.
That's not shouting yourself out, Luetin.
That's not shouting yourself out at all. Where can they find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Luetin09.
Perfect. You did it.
Hell yeah.
You did it. I mean, we never shout ourselves out at the end of the video. We just like to make other people do it.
We used to, but then we just stopped caring.
Yeah, then we just say, whatever, You know
where to find us. You know our names.
Unironically, thanks a ton for being here, man. Always appreciate it. Always lots of insight that I think we can all use in our time with our Warhammer world, considering how... Well, that's the British. I can't.
Wow.
I can't blame you for that one.
Yeah, but it's always good, entertaining, dry insight. Like it's never like a boring, it's good.
Sometimes the madness, if you approach it more seriously, it's even more fun. That's what I always think.
True. Join us next week for when DK tells me about dwarves in fantasy, and I accidentally call the Ultramarines the wrong shade of blue. On this next week's episode of Adeptus Ridiculous.
See you next time.
See you next time.